Yeah. So, are you a pastor?
Do you know, I have worked as a pastor in my previous job. I worked as an associate pastor in my church. So I have been one, but I'm not at the moment.
Oh, because I was wondering if you were.
Yeah.
Um, and do you write books as well?
Yes, I do. So I've ghostwritten a couple of books, but what I've actually written that is visible is a set of devotional books with my husband for families to
Oh,
better do. Going to do
wow.
Bible notes, Bible devotions, just time to talk as a family and include God in the conversation. So,
You know what? I'm gonna go and have a little dig and find those because we're bringing together our book notes on our website. So
oh,
yeah,
brilliant.
and I like to. Oh, there we go. So we got them there. Once I've come up, I'm gonna screenshot that and then
Yeah,
bring
yeah,
them
yeah.
in.
There's five of them all together. They're all on Amazon or Eden or somewhere
Ah.
like that. So,
And what are the objective of those two books? Are they more to kind of just
well,
help the family get to know God?
well, it's five of them, and it's one of those things where my husband, so we're both, we've brought up a family. I mean, our kids
Yeah,
are all grown up now,
yeah,
but my husband wasn't brought up in a faith context, and I
yeah,
was.
yeah,
And so when we got married and had kids, it was this thing going, well, for me, it was really normal to do
yeah,
Bible reading with my
yeah,
parents before bed and
yeah,
pray, good sleep, and we kind of navigated what that looked like.
yeah,
And we've raised six kids, and it's that
yeah,
thing of just going, how do you just keep God part of the conversation in an ordinary way? How do you help families do faith? Because
yeah,
again, as a church leader, I saw families kind of really dependent on church to
yes,
go, you do the God stuff, and in the
yeah,
week we just don't. And I was like, no, this.
yeah,
So we've created them just to be done around a table or the bed
yeah,
or wherever,
yeah,
but to have short Bible bit,
yeah,
something to think about. And then we always leave them with two questions. And the
yeah,
questions sometimes are about God, but like, for example, if we were doing about, I don't know, a story where someone's got very angry,
yeah,
it's about saying, talk as a family about a time, grown-ups, tell
yeah,
the kids about a time when you got really angry and
yeah,
and how you dealt with it. And it's just to help families have good conversations, full stop, as
yeah,
well as
yeah.
God conversations and bring God into it. So yeah, I'm really passionate about that stuff. So
You know what? I'm gonna definitely be looking at that personally and for the community that
yeah,
I'm nurturing. Because I have an 8-year-old and he's starting to ask the
perfect.
questions. And I'm
Perfect
like,
age.
so yeah, no, that's really
Yeah.
helpful. I love
Well,
discussing things with him, but yeah, I love that it's structured.
just gives you and the other thing I'm really passionate about, because I also used to be a teacher,
Yeah,
is kids understanding how the Bible fits together, because so
yeah,
often
yeah,
a verse from here and a bit of
yeah,
a story from there. And
yeah,
so we've also tried to do it that
yeah,
we help kids to go, like, we're going to spend 3 weeks looking at Abraham, and
yeah,
this is where, do you remember we did Moses, so Moses come, and just try
yeah,
and fit where, so people go, oh, it's not just fairy tales,
yes,
it's a history that we can dig
yes.
into, learn from, talk about, grow as a family, grow, like, so there's a whole year's worth of books. So
Great.
each
Oh,
book does about 12 weeks, but yeah,
man.
so
UK. So who's Becca and how did Becca come to do Restore?
oh well, that is a long story to settle
Oh,
in. um so
yeah,
I mean, I'm nearly 50, which is a
yeah.
shocking thing to me. I've got another year
You
to go,
look amazing.
but it's coming.
No
um,
wrinkles.
yeah, that's Zoom, isn't it? Zoom
Oh,
hides.
I love it.
Um, but so I grew up in a Christian family
Yeah,
in part of the Cotswolds, very
yeah,
sheltered, and I did genuinely have quite an idyllic childhood.
yeah,
Didn't have loads of money or anything, but it was this growing up with the countryside as your back garden, and but faith being a massive part of everything. Church 3 times on Sunday, all of those things. In the week, my parents ran the youth group, so they ran Sunday school. So my parents were like, faith was part of everything. It's just who we were and what we did.
yeah,
And then as we grew up and I went away to university, I guess there's this element of trying to find your own faith, and I very much did. But I also felt, I think particularly at uni, and maybe even at sixth form at school, this like the tug and the pressures of, but my mate's doing some really fun things and I probably shouldn't do them, but they look really
yeah,
fun. And I had these moments where I, kind of stuck my fingers over my ears and did a good old la la la, I can't hear you to God.
Yeah.
And then would inevitably get to a place where, you know, I came back because I knew where home was,
Yeah.
and I knew that that was God. And actually I had this is a bit of a sidebar really, but I had this really interesting moment when I was at uni, when one day I'd had, you know, I'd probably been being a little bit wild for a few weeks, and then I'd had to sort it out with God and like, no, like this isn't what I'm going to do. And the next day, my friend who I lived with, who wasn't a Christian, she said, "Have you been talking to God again?" And I said, "Yes, I have." And she went, "I can tell. You're always so much more calm and contained. Like you're always better when you are." And I just thought, how fascinating that I'd known I needed to sort myself out and just be back in connection with God, but that my friend could see the difference was
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
So like, it was just so, but that was part of my journey. I kind of did these, you know, I just had a few years of spirals in and out of, I'm totally following God and I'm totally not. Just, you know, which
Family.
I think a lot of people do, but it was always my tether. I always came back.
Yeah.
I always did. And I did a history degree. I trained to be a teacher, and um I wanted to get a job in the Bristol area because it's near where I grew up.
Yeah.
I had lots of friends there. But in those days, you had this big newspaper, the Times Educational Supplement, where you look for jobs. And as I was looking for jobs, I always had a little look at the overseas section because it was interesting.
Yeah.
They ended up applying for a job in Kenya, which was not Bristol. And then I got it, which I don't think I'd really expected.
Yeah.
So my first teaching job was in this beautiful school in the Highlands of Kenya, a place called St Andrew's Turi, which is one of those places that now I realise everywhere you go, you bump into people who went there. But it was this beautiful, beautiful time. I had 2 years teaching in this school. It was hard work because it was my first job, and I didn't have some of the experience that would have really helped me my
Yeah.
first job.
Yeah.
And it was a boarding school, and I loved that. And it was a Christian school, and I loved that. And so all of that was wonderful. And out there, I met my first husband. He was a farmer, and we had quite a whirlwind romance, and quite quickly came to this crunch point of what's happening in our relationship, because I had a 2-year contract at this school. I knew that for career progression, I should move back to the UK and get some, you know, different experience under my belt.
Yeah.
And kind of with that in mind, he proposed and we got married. And it's one of those things, isn't it, where in hindsight, you go, that wasn't a brilliant decision making back there. You know, he was a Christian, he went to church, we went to church together. But the reality is that from the moment, the real reality is that there were a lot of red flags in that relationship that I should have spotted.
Yeah.
But I was quite naive. I'd grown up in this very sheltered world of where you know, I didn't even think about these things. But certainly from our honeymoon onwards, that marriage just spiraled into a very, very, very difficult and frightening place. And very quickly had 2 little girls. And there was just this moment after I had my second daughter, and I was planning, and I'd come over to the UK to have them just for, you know, passport's sake and a whole bunch of things. And I was really scared of going back to Kenya, but I was really determined to make it work, to try and make them, you know, do everything I could to make this marriage work.
Yeah.
Even though it was such a desperately lonely place. And the reality is, you know, there wasn't a lot of physical violence, although it did come.
Yeah.
But what did happen, which actually I think people underestimate the reality of psychological and emotional abuse.
Definitely.
And the constant putting down of me, the constant devaluing of me. I was never good enough. I was always useless, slowly cutting me off from all my friends and family, you know, limiting phone calls home, limiting who I was allowed to see and who I wasn't allowed to see. One day I realized that he sold my car, so I could no longer drive and get myself anywhere without asking permission, and borrowing a car. There was just so much control, but it happened insidiously. It happened so slowly that on one level, I didn't really see it happening, and I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't have a name for what was happening because there wasn't physical violence actually at that point. I just thought I had to try harder and help him to find his way to being different. And I took all that responsibility on myself. But as my girls were born and as I began to recognize the impact on them, I came to this place going, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to survive. I don't know how to help them grow up and expect good things from people who are meant to love them. I don't know how to do these things, but I felt really trapped. I've been brought up in a world that said, you know, this, you've made your bed, now lie in it. And I thought that's what I had to do. But God was so gracious to me in the middle of that. You know, I'd had this moment when my first daughter was born, when I'd held her in my arms. I was in church, she was only about a week old, and I'd looked at her and just had this very, you know, new mum wave of emotion about, oh, I love you so much. I didn't know it was possible. And I don't often audibly hear God speak, but God did. And he just went, that's how I feel about you, Becca, never forget it. And I just had this moment of going, okay, so whatever else is going on in my life, and by this point I knew that I was unhappy, didn't have any other language, I knew I was unhappy, but I thought, well, I've got God, and he just walked with me through so much of that. And there were some really frightening moments, some real horrible moments within that marriage where, you know, my world fell apart, but I always knew God was with me, and that was a huge thing. And then in this so I had my second daughter. I was back in the UK, and this one Sunday evening I was watching Songs of Praise because I wasn't really up to church at that point. I was knackered and broken and all the rest of it.
But I love Songs of Praise.
Do you know, I haven't watched it for years, but it had a real big part in my story.
Yeah.
So this one particular evening we were watching it. I was watching it with my sister-in-law, and it was a choir competition. And there was a children's choir that sang a Matt Redman song. Now, I'd been out of the country and I didn't even know who Matt Redman was. I was out of touch with modern music. Like I lived on the other side of the world with a different whole culture running. Yeah. But it was a song about God's the Father heart of God, and it was just really beautiful, and it really touched me. And I said, oh, I love this song. I didn't think much more of it. Anyway, when I got back to Kenya with my two little girls, ready to make a go of everything, my sister-in-law, lover, had bought me and sent me a CD. Those were the days. She sent me a CD, and I pulled out the cover to look at the lyrics, and I realised that these lyrics, which talked about God singing his love song over you, which is what had really grabbed me, came from a verse in Zephaniah. And the whole of that passage it goes on to say words along the lines of, you know, daughter Israel, I've seen your pain. You don't need to suffer anymore. You know, I want you to be safe. That's a very Bekah paraphrase of that section. It's Zephaniah 3:14. Go and have a look. But as you look at the bigger passage, it's this message from God that just says, you've sat in this long enough, you can leave. That's essentially what it says. And that's certainly the message that my heart received from this was, God is telling me that I may have made my bed, but I do not have to lie in it. And within a month, I'd managed to just quietly, discreetly organise plane tickets. And in a long story cut short, I came home with my two little girls, and I left that relationship. And that was frightening in itself. But it was this moment when I thought, I don't know what's going to come next. I might be on my own with these girls for the rest of my life, but that is better than where I am now. And it's safer and it's better for my girls. And so I made this huge decision, but I really felt like God was with me in that. So that's a part of how I've got to where I am. But of course, the rest of the story just is the reality of coming back and being a single mum for 5 years, and, you know, trying to make ends meet and getting a job and doing what you can to help these girls, you know, just flourish and be all that they can be. I had an amazing family who were really supportive, and I had a church actually who theologically did not know what to do with me, like not at all. They were like, this is not what we do. But they knew that they loved me, and they were amazing. And so over the course of that next so when I came home, I moved back in with my parents, and next door was a house that had belonged to my grandparents. And since they died, my mum had tenants in there, but her tenants handed in their notice the day that I received that CD. And so she just said, look, by the time you're home, that house will be free and that can be your home. And so, you know, my mum became my landlady, which, you know, has its own dynamic. But it was amazing. So I had this house next door to my parents. And over that summer, I lived at home because my youngest daughter was quite sick. I lived with my mum,
Yeah.
but the people from guys from church, they just came and helped me renovate that house, stop it from being a granny house, turn it into a family house. And they came and they stripped floors and wallpaper and sanded and painted and decorated. And there was one lady, she was amazing, and she just had, out of her housekeeping money every month, she bought me a present every month for a year. And it was just something to make my home a home, my house a home. And it was a little set of mixing bowls, that all nest into each other, and a salt and pepper pot, and just little things every month and they were just beautiful. And they were family. They just meant I wasn't on my own. And I think for me, I so appreciated it. But since then, I've realized I was so fortunate. There's a lot of women do not get that kind of support. They just get stuck at I don't know what to do with your theology. And I, for somehow my church got beyond that. We'll work out the theology. Right now, the need, you have a lot of need and we need to help you. And they were phenomenal. And I recognize now that, looking back, that was such an important part of my recovery. And it was such an important part for my kids. They're part of this big family. They weren't just, weren't just, some, because I was broken emotionally, I was done. But I had all these people around me who babysat when I needed to go to a job interview, who came and just made sure that I wasn't doing it on my own. And so that's a really massive part of why I do what I do now, really. But since then, I've been on this huge journey of, I went back into teaching. I got asked by some mates from uni if I'd go and be an office manager. Had to Google what that was, because I didn't really know. But I went and did that with them. They were Christians, and I got involved in, they tithed their profits, and I got really involved in the charities that we gave that money away to. So a big part of my job became kind of like those relationships and raising money and doing things. And I learned so much about communications, about charities, about running an organization. It was a really interesting job. And then I met my husband, who I'm married to now, Steve, who's wonderful. We went on holiday with our two families. It was a care for the family holiday at the Spring Harvest place in France. So it couldn't be more twee if you tried. But we met and we chatted and got on like a house on fire, although both of us were very nervous about kind of dipping our toes back into any kind of relationship. But we did end up getting married, and I moved down to Sussex, and we created this crazy big blended family. And since then, I've just done a number of jobs. I taught again, because that's, teaching for those jobs you can always go back to. I ended up working locally for an organisation that supports survivors of sexual assault, and I loved that job. And I ran their education programme, went into schools, talked about relationships, sex, consent. Again, Christian organisation, so with that as an ethos, but just trying to talk on a level that is helpful for all young people. Funding ran out on that, went back into teaching. I used to run a magazine called Liberty, which again is a huge story, but again taught me some comms. Then I ended up working for Compassion UK as a PR manager. It's crazy. It's a crazy career path, honestly. It's just like bouncing.
You've done so much amazing things.
But all the way learning on the job and learning new skills. So learning to understand like the world around sexual violence and violence against women and girls, learning how to like finding networks and connections in the Christian world with a magazine, and learning how to and we were very focused on empowering women. And so that was again learning more and more about the challenges that women face on so many levels, in the UK and around the world. Then working for Compassion, and again learning a whole new bunch of skills. But I really felt like God had been laying on my heart to study more around theology. So I started to do my master's in theology, where I really focused in on violence, and I really focused in on actually what does the Bible have to say. And so I ended up doing my dissertation on a passage in Judges, which tells the story of the Levite and his concubine. It's this hideous story of a woman who's neglected and rejected and then terribly abused. And because my the pathway for my master's was theology with preaching, I did how do you preach on a passage like Judges 19? How do you do that? How do you preach on, probably not when the children are in, although I've managed to avoid around it. But it's what's the Bible telling us? Because it's this story that people just skip. I've
Yeah.
never heard a sermon on it. It's not in our children's Bibles correctly because
I
it's.
heard it recently.
Have you?
I
Oh,
heard it recently and I was like, oh, this doesn't fit. Where's the happy ending?
yeah.
Kind of
There is
like
not a
that.
happy ending.
Where is that happy? I wanted a happy ending there. You know, you have that cliffhanger
Yeah.
that you just get really
Yeah.
frustrated
Like, come
with.
on, it's coming. Like, it's not.
It's
It's not
not
coming.
coming. Yeah.
And you kind of look at that and go, well, why is it in the Bible? Because there has to be a reason. God, like the Bible is there on purpose, all of it. It's God's, and there's so much that's in there. And I think some of it is us saying, actually, this shows that God sees, and he sees, he hears, and he knows.
Yeah.
So for the millions of women for whom that
Yeah.
story resonates,
Yeah.
God sees, he hears, and he knows. He like, you're not invisible. God
Yeah.
sees, God calls it.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating because that little passage ends with God's people coming together in
Yeah.
holy outrage,
Yeah.
saying, has such a thing ever been seen or done? We must speak up and do something. And I just think it's one of those, that verse alone is like this call from 3,000 years ago to recognize that this stuff is going on, because that what can't have been a standalone story.
Yeah.
You know, this stuff is going on. It's time to do something.
Yeah.
And it's a call for the church to speak up and do something. So that's really what sits at the heart of what we do at Restored now.
Yeah.
And so I was doing all of this, started working for church at my local church, and I was associate pastor, which I really loved, working for the local church.
Yeah.
And then, long story cut short, the job at Restored came up, and Restored is a phenomenal organisation working to end violence against women and girls.
Yes.
With an increasing focus at that point on responding to domestic abuse. And it was just one of those moments when I saw that the founder actually was stepping down, and looking to pass it on. And I just had one of those feelings in my tummy when I thought, oh, I should apply for that. And then had imposter syndrome and thought, I can't do that. And then, you know, as God does, he kept waking me up in the night thinking about it. And I said, well, God, if you do want me to do this, can you confirm it? And over the next 24 hours, 4 people said, have you seen Mandy Marshall's leaving Restored? That job's got your name all over it. And I thought, oh, I'll apply. I'll apply.
Wow.
And here I am.
That's amazing.
That was a long.
When you share your story, I can see God just dropping breadcrumbs like all over your life, like in every job, in every career, everything you've done, that mishmash of learning the pain and all of that to bring about this beautiful, you know, you're formidable in what you do for Restored, and that's come from that path. And even like you were saying about the story in Judges, you know, we don't want those stories, but sometimes they forge the path.
Yes.
They bring about this warrior, because you have these wounds, but it makes you more passionate about your cause, because you're like, well, I've had the pain. I understand that, you know, I understand the people who come into my space, because, you know, one of the things we've been doing with TWIRL is we've been dealing with the really hard topics, really, really difficult topics, but in a way that, you know, because I feel like what you do with churches, we need to have more of these discussions to be able to let people know that yes, life happens, but you don't have to sit there and take it. Like you just said, you don't have to stay in that. You can get up and make choices that can really bring about, maximize, as I always say, maximize thrive, which is what I hear from you. Like, it's incredible to hear that you have gone through all those things, and where other people died, you didn't die. You came out and you done a vision that is incredible. So yeah, no, I'm really inspired by what you shared. And what has been one of the most difficult challenges about your journey now? Because what I find is that we always talk about arriving, but we talk about what arriving might look like. Do you still have challenges now? Do you still have to work through things now?
Oh, definitely. I have massive imposter syndrome. It's the truth. You know, and it's such because and it isn't even a fake thing. The reality is I've I've started a number of
Yeah.
jobs
Yes.
where I've gone in and
Yeah.
I've really felt that God's called me to do it.
Yes.
I've been really honest in an interview, gone, I haven't done this before and I don't
Yeah.
really know what I'm doing. And then I get given the job and I think, I
Wow.
don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so there's this permanent and I'm beginning to learn to just live with it,
Yeah.
but go, well, this is just how my life
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
there's always a I don't know what I'm doing
Yeah.
thing, that it means I'm constantly trying to work it out.
Yes.
And you feel like you can never quite relax because you just think, oh, but equally, in the middle of that, what I have seen is God just be so
Yeah.
extraordinary at bringing the right people in at the right time who do know what they're doing
Yeah.
and who can. Like, so, for example, when I began at Restored, they came
Mm.
around to our first AGM.
Yeah.
I've never run an AGM in my life. I didn't. So I and it was COVID. I
Yeah.
downloaded all the documents I could
Yeah.
find on the internet. Couldn't get into the office to even
Oh,
see what paperwork there was, but I
yeah.
downloaded everything. And I sat and I thought, I I think I understand this, and if I do understand it, I think I think perhaps we haven't quite been compliant for a couple of years. I think,
Oh
and
no.
I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And I just sat and I thought, well, I'm going to have to find a proper
Yeah.
governance lawyer. And
Yeah.
anyway, the next day we had an email come in to our info at saying from somebody saying they'd like to volunteer. And my colleague had got back to them really quickly and said, do you know what, we're not doing events at the moment, so we don't need volunteers.
Yeah.
And I said, no, just get them to send in their CV. Anyway, this person was a corporate governance lawyer who had headed up a major banking legal division.
Yeah.
She was, and I thought, oh yes, you can volunteer. You can help me.
We need you.
And I was like, that's amazing. Within
It's
24
incredible.
hours, I knew enough to know that I was in a bind,
Yeah.
but I didn't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
But within 24 hours, God had given me somebody who could. And I think one of the things I've learned is never be afraid to ask for help,
Yeah.
never be afraid to say what you don't know,
Yeah.
and be ready to make lots of friends
Yeah. Oh.
who can help along the way. But
Yeah.
I'm always, and I think it's still a challenge. We've done really well the last few years, and part of me just feels that as a pressure to go,
Yeah.
how are you going to keep that up next year?
Oh, honestly, hearing you honestly say that, you're so refreshing, the honesty that you have, because a lot of people do go into interviews and lie. Well, they're like, yeah, I can
Mm,
do it, and then they're wetting themselves because they know they can't do it.
yeah,
Because,
no,
I've heard so many people. I'm not very good at lying, so I couldn't do it.
no, I can't either. Yeah,
But even my husband, he laughs at me. He's like, you can't lie to save your life. It's like it
that's
just
a good thing.
the guilt.
Yeah, it's a good
I
thing.
wear it on my sleeves. But yeah, no, that honesty, and even in the space that you're in right now, the capacity of leading and spearheading a vision, to hear you say that as someone who does the same thing in what I do is really refreshing, because sometimes there's a pressure to kind of wear this facade of, I've got it all together, I'm strong all the time, um, I always know what I'm doing and where I'm going.
Yeah,
And I feel like it is so powerful when you can say, you know what? No, sometimes I'm afraid. And
yeah,
sometimes I literally have to pray and say, God, I need the direction. I need the support. Like
yeah.
you're just saying about the volunteer coming in. That's
Mm,
incredible, honestly.
amazing.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's amazing. And I feel like even just hearing what you shared has kind of spurred on my journey. I know that if it's doing that for me, then I know the women that watch it are gonna be like, this is incredible. But yeah, so when we talk about vision for the future, do you kind of do you in general have a like vision, kind of go, okay, this is where we're going, or do you do a lot of this kind of, I'm gonna be praying one step at a time and we're just gonna focus on that?
It's like a balance of both. So, as an organization, I have made a 3-year plan,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we've got. I know. So I know where we want to get, and then I have
Yeah.
to work out how we're going to get there
Yeah.
on one level. But
Yeah.
I'm always on a one day at a time. At the same time, I hold it loosely because
Yeah.
I think God surprises us sometimes, and I can pray and think this is where we're going, and then God surprises us, and an opportunity arises that we had no idea was even possible,
Yeah.
and then you have to pray and go, well, do we let go of some of this so that we can follow this, or
Yeah.
And holding those two things in tension is really hard sometimes. And that's
Yeah.
when you do need good people around you. Sometimes to go, no, stick to your mission.
Yeah.
And it's that, well, because great opportunities aren't
Yeah.
always your job. They're sometimes
Yeah.
there for somebody else. And I think
Definitely.
working that bit out is really important. So, and for me, I am if I see a bright, shiny idea, I'm like, woohoo, let's go.
I am
And
too.
and it's been a real discipline for me to go,
Yeah.
that is a great idea, but it's not for now.
Yeah.
So I think almost on a yearly basis, deciding this is what our focus is.
Yeah.
And some things might fit in that and some things won't. I spoke to, I had some mentoring for a while from a brilliant friend, Catherine Hill from Care for the Family, and when we were talking, and I was doing my strategy, what is it? And she said no, and she talked a little bit about what they do at Care for the Family was they think through what ideas they will and won't go forward with, and they have a bit of a filter, and it's really helped me. And their filter basically was, I won't get their filter right now, but fundamentally that it was a choice about, does it include families?
Yes.
Is it preventative? And there was something else, so don't quote me, don't see me Care for the Family for getting it wrong. But for me, there's this thing of going, so at Restored, we have this mission that says three things. We speak up about violence against women and girls, we equip the church to stand against domestic abuse, and we support survivors. So if we get an idea and it doesn't fit into any of those three, it's not an idea for us.
Wow.
Because that doesn't, it's a brilliant thing, but it's not our thing. So we've got these filters going, does it do these three things? Well, and even then, sometimes we've got some tighter filters and going, well, it would be speaking up, but we simply haven't got capacity, and it would detract from this, which is really important. So, that decision making is important. But I on one level, I have a big plan, and on the other level, and so on a personal level, my husband's been really sick, and so a year ago he was given 5 months to live, and thank you, Jesus, he is still really healthy and doing amazingly well. But it has made us rethink life, and it has made us, this time, literally, it was the 17th of April last year that we got told he had 5 months. And it made us just go away and go, well, if we've got 5 months, what do we do? And you're trying to hold in tension what the doctors have said, the fact that we know God can do anything. But so how do you live? How do you... And we had to do this combination of going, well, we have to get our wills in order, and we have to, there was a load of practical, we had to write to the life insurance company. There was a whole bunch of things we had to do, and we had to, on one level, live as if we only had 5 months left, and on another hand, live as if we didn't. And it was this weird holding it together. And now we're in a complete, we have no idea what's going on now.
Wow.
But and I find, so on one level, I find planning far ahead really complicated in my brain on a personal level. Like, can we book a holiday in August? I don't know. My kids, our two youngest kids, finish uni this year, and they're planning to go traveling next year. And one of them just had a meltdown the other week. And is it even okay to go traveling? Is Dad going to be well enough for me to feel like it's okay to go away for a month? It's like, I don't know. And then then you do that, well, we have to live to survive this period. We've learned to live a day at a time, to go, today's a good day, let's enjoy it. And then there's this, and it's just given me a new perspective on how you plan for the future, but you hold it lightly, and you enjoy today without worrying too much about what down the road. And it's a complex tension, because you can only really enjoy today if you've done some of the planning and go, well, I planned for that, so I can put it to bed now. So that's,
it's really weird, because in a job like what I do at the moment, like, we have events till next year, like, and you have to plan for them. But I totally hear what you're saying, because I think for me personally, being transparent, the frustration is controlling what the future is like.
Exactly.
So whether it's a case of, I know in your situation, it's your husband's terminal illness. For me, it's just, I just want to be in control of how things go, how things develop. God, you've given me this vision. I want to be down here. And he's like, you're going to be here. And that lack of control, what you're saying is very powerful about holding it lightly, because what you're saying is let go of control, that it may not go the way you want it to go, and that's quite powerful. If people want to find you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I'm just on social media like anybody else as Bekah Legg, but Restored, I would, if anybody sits and goes, I need to know more about this and I can't wait, then I'd go to our website, which is restored-uk.org. I mean, we're on socials as well, but restored-uk.org. And within that, then there's information just about domestic abuse itself. That's how you can access our survivors network. And that's one thing I would say now, is we host an online network for Christian women who've been subjected to domestic abuse, whether you're still in that relationship or you've left. And you can join as anonymously as you like. So to begin with, it's just sending an email and requesting to join, and you can find that on the website. And you can give a fake name email. It's absolutely fine. And from there, you then can get access to a load of information. But you can also, if you feel brave enough, join a closed Facebook group that we've got, private Facebook group, which is beautiful. It's about 100 women in there. Or do recovery courses or any, from that point on, there's loads that you can get involved in when you feel like you want to. In fact, we're running our very first retreat next month, which I'm very excited about. It's 3 weeks away and we're getting very excited. 40 women. So that'll be lovely. I'm very excited. I'm just excited to meet people in person that I've met online. So it's just going to be wonderful. So that's really important that people know. If that's part of your story and you'd like to just find out a little bit more, do just pop online quietly when it's safe and do that and have a little look. And we've got a survivors handbook that we give free to survivors as well, so you can order that there as well. And there's more information on there about the way that we partner with churches and train and a whole bunch of things, but that's probably enough information for now.